The divorce decree had been final for 3 hours when I entered Summit Ridge Gear to return my badge and collect a box. Garrett stood in the aisle with Mallory Pike, guiding her past the desks like a reward he had earned. He did not flinch when he saw me, and that told me the timing was deliberate. Mallory will be involved in major decisions from now on, he announced, while people near production pretended not to stare. Then he looked at me and added, "Some people held this company back, but that ends today." Mallory turned toward Sadie Monroe's desk and asked when my office would be cleared because Garrett had promised she could move in. Garrett leaned closer, keeping his voice low enough to sound private but loud enough for me to hear. "At least now you understand I didn't lose anything in the divorce." I saw the bracelet on Mallory's wrist, the one listed in last month's expense report as a gift for a buyer. I placed my badge on Sadie's desk, requested a receipt, and refused to give Garrett the reaction he had staged. He turned away and resumed introducing Mallory as the woman who would help lead Summit Ridge into its next chapter. Mallory stepped toward my office, carrying herself like Garrett's promise had become legal authority. Sadie emerged from accounting with her phone pressed to her ear, her face drained of color. "Garrett." She pulled her funds. He spun around so quickly that Mallory nearly walked into him, then demanded to know which funds Sadie meant. Sadie confirmed the bank had received notice canceling Brooke Ellison's next scheduled disbursement because the company had violated the conditions attached to it. Garrett's mouth opened, but no explanation came, because his face had admitted he knew exactly what she meant. I picked up my receipt and moved toward the exit while every conversation around us stopped. Behind me, Mallory asked where the remaining money was coming from, and Garrett could not answer before the door closed. Garrett caught my arm before I reached the parking lot and pulled me into the conference room. The door shut behind us, cutting off the whispers outside, and he turned on me with his jaw tight. "You waited until today to do this because of Mallory." I placed the notice on the table. "I canceled money that had not been released because you violated the agreement you signed." He accused me of freezing payroll and trying to bury Summit Ridge, but the operating account remained untouched. The current pay period was protected. No assets had been seized, and no bank had been told to close anything. I opened the notice and placed 3 receipts beside it. One covered a weekend hotel stay listed as a supplier meeting. Another showed Mallory's bracelet recorded as a buyer gift, and the last sent office furniture to her apartment. Garrett called them bookkeeping choices, so I turned each page toward his approval signature. "You built the expense process," he snapped, reaching for the papers. "I did, which is why I know you went around it." Mallory had been standing beyond the glass wall, and the moment she heard her address, she entered. She looked at Garrett and asked, "You told me you paid for those things yourself." He promised her it was temporary, then ordered Sadie to send the announcement naming Mallory to management. Sadie stayed near the doorway and answered that no valid approval gave Mallory authority over expenses, staffing, or operations. Before Garrett could challenge her, Dean Fletcher entered carrying the production schedule. Their primary fabric supplier had stopped the shipment because the expected payment had not arrived. Workers nearby began looking toward us as Dean explained production would slow without the waterproof material. Garrett insisted another payment source was coming, but Dean asked whether anything had been signed, and Garrett gave him nothing. I collected my documents and told Dean the payroll period remained covered during the correction window. Then I left Mallory staring at the office she had not entered, asking Garrett where the money would come from. After I left Summit Ridge, Garrett pulled Mallory into his office and tried to restore the confidence he had lost. He told her the missing funds were temporary. An investor would step in, and Brooke Ellison was using money to frighten them. Mallory did not ask whether I was jealous. She asked to see the ownership agreement he promised would take effect when our divorce became final. Garrett produced an email he wrote, but there was no approval, signature, or document granting Mallory equity. She reminded him she had declined another position because he said she would become part owner of Summit Ridge. He told her to trust him instead of examining every page the way I had. That answer pushed her toward questions he had avoided. Mallory wanted to know who owned the equipment, which loans secured it, and why I could inspect the books. At Owen Prescott's office, I learned the answer had nothing to do with being Garrett's former wife. My premarital savings had been released in stages under a lending agreement, and each payment required reports and business use. I had surrendered any claim to Garrett's ownership in the divorce, but never money that had not been transferred. Owen warned me that I could not seize equipment, take over Summit Ridge, or pressure customers, so each step had to stay inside the contract. Then he placed 2 expense certifications together and showed me Mallory's signature beneath trips Garrett arranged. He had used the company card, selected the hotels, and approved the spending. Yet the forms made Mallory responsible for confirming the business purpose. If challenged, Garrett could claim he relied on information she provided. Mallory had crossed a line with a married man and accepted benefits she should have questioned. So she was not innocent. Still, the documents proved Garrett never planned to make her an equal partner. He had promised her a future while preparing records that could leave her holding the blame. The position he offered her was the one I had occupied, close enough to carry his consequences, but never protected from them. Mallory contacted me the next morning and asked to meet at a crowded diner near downtown Portland. She did not apologize when Owen Prescott and I arrived, and she did not pretend the affair had been an innocent misunderstanding. She slid into the booth, kept both hands around her coffee, and asked, "What are you planning to do with the documents carrying my signature?" I answered that I would not make private deals over company records. But she could tell the truth through her own attorney. Mallory insisted Garrett had told her our marriage was over months before their relationship began. I placed a photograph from an employee dinner between us, taken during that same period, with Garrett wearing his wedding ring and introducing me as his wife. She stared at it before admitting he claimed we were maintaining appearances because a divorce announcement might damage the company. I did not ask how often they met or what promises he made in private, because the 2 expense certifications already contained the question that mattered. I turned the documents toward her and asked, "Did you meet either supplier on these dates?" Mallory read the hotel names, delivery address, and travel notes before quietly answering, "No, but Garrett said you knew and approved everything." Owen explained that bonuses had to appear through payroll, not as furniture coded for a showroom or personal travel renamed as supplier development. Her face changed when she realized Garrett had placed her name beneath statements he could later claim he had trusted. Mallory admitted he promised her an ownership stake the moment our divorce became final. Garrett also assured her I had surrendered every connection to Summit Ridge, leaving nobody with authority to question the records after I left. Owen clarified that my divorce settlement ended marital ownership claims, not the company's separate obligations under my lending agreement. The distinction left Mallory staring at 2 versions of Garrett's story, both designed to keep a different woman from checking the same facts. She agreed to preserve her emails, travel calendar, and written instructions, then transfer them through her attorney. I offered no promise that she would keep her job, avoid repayment, or escape responsibility for documents she signed. Mallory stood when Garrett's name appeared across her phone for the 5th time, but she let the call end unanswered. She was not helping me because she regretted hurting me yet. She was helping because his paperwork proved he was willing to let her carry him. Garrett gathered the staff and stood where everyone could see him, using the steady voice he saved for buyers. He claimed Summit Ridge was under attack by an ex-wife who could not accept that he had moved on. Then he promised to protect every paycheck with his own money. Even though Sadie had seen the balance, she did not challenge him. She asked whether accounting could release the cash report. Garrett refused and told everyone loyalty mattered more than panic. Dean placed the production schedule on the table and showed 3 orders that could not be completed without the delayed waterproof fabric. Do we have signed funding to pay for it? He asked, keeping his eyes on Garrett. Garrett answered that several conversations were progressing, but he could not name one commitment on paper. After the meeting, company counsel requested records for the contract review, and Sadie forwarded the emails she had preserved. One instructed her to rename a private weekend as supplier development, while another ordered her to delay my quarterly report until the next disbursement cleared. The timing connected everything Garrett had kept separate when he spoke to me. He had pushed the divorce forward while planning to receive more of my money before I could see how he spent it. Owen laid the emails beside the settlement papers, and the pattern became impossible to soften. Garrett had told me Summit Ridge carried too much risk, and that surrendering any ownership claim would protect me from its debts. In reality, he needed my signature before the delayed report exposed trips, gifts, and apartment purchases tied to Mallory. The affair and funding scheme were not separate mistakes. One had financed the other. That afternoon, Summit Ridge's largest customer contacted me because I had once overseen its supply process. I explained that I no longer managed the company and advised them to rely only on written delivery commitments from current leadership. They shifted the account to Dean after Garrett offered another deadline without confirmed materials. He still occupied the largest office, but people who needed results had stopped trusting his promises. Owen arranged the negotiation with Garrett, his attorney, an accountant, and an investor who had reviewed the books. I did not ask for the company, Mallory's dismissal, or admission about the affair. I asked for repayment under the lending agreement, protection for payroll, and controls preventing Garrett from approving expenses. Garrett leaned back and said, "This is still about Mallory. No matter how many documents you bring." I slid the records across the table and told him to point to one line mentioning jealousy. The hotel charges, furniture delivery, delayed reports, and supplier entries carried his approval. Dates and instructions. The accountant confirmed the company had violated the funding terms and could not force disbursement from me. Garrett's attorney stopped interrupting when Owen produced the email, showing Garrett delayed my report until after the transfer. The investor offered to buy a controlling interest if Garrett left management and surrendered authority over spending, staffing, and financial commitments. The purchase money would cover suppliers, protect wages, complete orders, and repay part of what Summit Ridge owed me. Garrett could keep a smaller economic interest, but he would no longer approve expenses or act as the company's sole decision-maker. If he refused, the remaining option was litigation while the business continued losing cash. Garrett looked toward Mallory when she entered with her attorney, as though he expected her beside him. Instead, she signed an agreement to return personal benefits and provide emails showing he directed the false descriptions. She did not keep her job or escape responsibility, while Sadie and Dean remained because their records showed they raised concerns and gained nothing. Garrett signed after his attorney explained that protecting his title could destroy the company before employees were paid. I watched his signature settle beneath the clause, removing him from control. The same signature he had used to make private choices look legitimate. There was nothing left for me to argue, because the paper had already answered him. Mallory handed her badge to Sadie and walked toward one exit, while Garrett took the other. For the first time, neither woman was carrying the weight he had signed into our names. A business paper reported Summit Ridge had changed control after a cash shortage and expense problems. The article never mentioned the affair, but Garrett told friends I had used family money to take his company after the divorce. He repeated that I punished him for choosing Mallory because that version made him a wounded husband instead of an executive who signed false reports. I did not answer online or give records to reporters. Mallory submitted a signed statement through her attorney, and every sentence stayed tied to what she could prove. She confirmed their relationship began while Garrett lived with me and admitted she knew our marriage was not over. She also stated that I never approved the trips, jewelry, furniture, or hotel charges entered as business expenses. She confirmed Garrett had promised her ownership he had no authority to grant. Telling the truth did not erase Mallory's part. She lost her position, repaid personal benefits traced to her, and faced employers who questioned the reports she signed. Her statement stopped Garrett from claiming I knew about the spending or approved it. The woman he displayed as proof that he had upgraded his life became the witness who closed his last escape route. Sadie and Dean never defended me with speeches. When former employees asked what happened, they repeated two facts. I preserved payroll, and Garrett delayed my report while seeking more money. That changed how people understood the divorce without turning my pain into entertainment. Garrett lost respect because his instructions survived longer than his explanation. He stopped me after the final signing and admitted he brought Mallory to the office because he wanted me to see him win. Then he asked me to persuade the new investor to keep him as an advisor because the staff listened to me. I no longer control Summit Ridge, I answered, giving him the distance he demanded. Garrett later took a sales job with an equipment company in Idaho, depending on performance instead of my money or another woman carrying his promises. 1 year later, Summit Ridge gear was smaller, steadier, and honest about what it could deliver. Dean ran operations. Sadie managed internal controls, and every expense required approval beyond one person's signature. The old campaign built around Garrett's genius disappeared, replaced by product quality, timelines, and the people who had always done the work. No one needed his version of the company anymore. Mallory moved to a city and took a sales position with an outdoor retailer. Her letter reached me without excuses, admitting she saw signs my marriage was not over, but chose the story that made her feel chosen. She did not ask for friendship or forgiveness, and I did not offer either. I placed the letter in the case file and left it there. Garrett completed the payments required by the settlement and stopped contacting me directly. Sadie mentioned he once called Dean asking whether Summit Ridge needed someone in sales, but Dean answered that the role reported to the same people Garrett had dismissed. He remained in Idaho, building an ordinary life without my money, my systems, or Mallory carrying his promises. That was where his choices finally settled. I was promoted to lead supplier risk across the Northwest, taking the title I once refused because Garrett said my success made him look small. Owen and I met after the legal work ended, beginning with walks and dinners where questions were never called controlling. When he wanted a future with me, I took my time. Ask me anything, he said, and meant it. In our house overlooking the Oregon pines, I wore the earrings Garrett once called too severe. Owen smiled and said, "They look exactly right on you." I touched one, remembered every year I had made myself smaller, and answered, "I know." Some chapters close without returning the years we gave them. What remains is the courage to stop shrinking, ask honest questions, and choose people who respect the answers. I found peace when I stopped proving my worth and began building a life where love never required me to disappear again.